Dear students, I want to lecture today to you on your study guide on page 105, the fermentation of carbohydrates. Now, it is quite important for us to know what carbohydrates can bacteria ferment. And by this fermentation, we can also identify organisms. Certain organisms can only ferment certain types of carbohydrates. Other organisms will ferment another type of carbohydrate, and that is also helping us in the identification of the organism. So on this page 105, they say to use fermentation tubes to study the catabolic activities of bacteria on carbohydrates. Now, what is carbohydrates? It will include glucose, sucrose, lactose. There is a lot of these different types of sugars that we are using. But normally we're using there also the indicator phenol red. Now, what is interesting about phenol red? In a test tube broth, at a pH of 7, it's got an orange color. When the bacteria can produce acid from this carbohydrate, let's say glucose, if we can produce an acid, that orange color in that test tube will then change to a yellow color. If the bacteria is producing an alkaline, that orange color will become a red color. Also, you will find there's a figure for you, figure 25.1 on page 105, where they show you inside that test tube is a Durham tube. That Durham tube is been filled also with the broth. Remember, in this test tubes is glucose broth or a sucrose broth or a lactose broth, different types of carbohydrates. Alright. And that Durham tube is a small test tube that we put inside upside down. And that is also filled with the liquid or the broth. Now, when the bacteria is producing acid and gas, then it will push the liquid out of that small tube. It will push it out into the environment, and we will find a gas bubble as been shown for you in the first figure in 25.1. Sometimes they're producing so much gas in that Durham tube that this Durham tube is starting to float. Okay, now I just want to go through this overview with you guys as well. They say a wide variety of carbohydrates are fermented by bacteria, and the pattern of fermentation is characteristic of a certain type of organism, species or genera or taxonomic group of bacteria. This knowledge of carbohydrates fermented by a particular organism is helping in the identification of that organism. Reactions of carbohydrates employed for identification are equally degradative catabolic reactions. It's a catabolic reaction that's taking place, breaking down with the production of energy. These reactions can be determined by inoculating. So when in the test tube, when it's sterile with the glucose, and we take our inoculation loop and we inoculate this broth, that's the process of inoculating, when we inoculate the sterile medium with the bacteria. These reactions can be determined by inoculating into carbohydrate broth containing then the Durham tube. The medium consists essentially of a nutrient broth plus then a 0.5% of the different types of sugars, either glucose, sucrose, lactose, melibbiose. There is hundreds of them. Since the usual end product of carbohydrate fermentation is normally acid or acid and gas. And that's what we can see in this test tubes. Either we will see that orange color changed to yellow, that means acid production. Or if it changed to a yellow color, plus there is gas bubble being trapped into that Durham tube, then we say it's acid and gas. Normally we just write a capital A plus a capital G. Or if only acid is, we only write A. If it's an alkaline, we will write ALK. But I can also tell you that when an organism is producing an alkaline, that means above a pH of 7, you will not find gas. You will only find an alkaline. Now what is also interesting is what is standing in the second paragraph of this overview, where they say, in the addition of the preceding routine method for testing fermentation carbohydrates, sometimes it is useful to determine whether organisms utilizes carbohydrates by oxidative metabolism. Now what are we doing here? We're taking two tubes, both glucose. The one is just the broth, the nutrient broth with the glucose. The other one is glucose and the broth, but a layer of paraffin oil on top. That makes the one tube anaerobic and the other tube aerobic. Alright, now we can determine, is this fermentation taking place under anaerobic conditions or what is happening here? Now let's see what they're saying. They say oxidative metabolism. Then the yellow color, the acid production, will only happening into the tube without paraffin oil. Without paraffin oil. But if it happens in both tubes, the one with the paraffin oil and the other one without the paraffin oil, then we say it is fermentative metabolism. Alright, if there is no reaction, a lack of acid production in either of these tubes indicates that this organism cannot utilize sugar. Cannot utilize sugar. So for that reason, we can test a lot of different carbohydrates in different test tubes, incubated at, obviously when we inoculate, we will not see immediately the reaction. We had to incubate, and normally we in the second year group, we normally incubate for 24 hours at 37 degrees Celsius. And then after that 24 hours of incubation, then only we can see, can the bacteria use this carbohydrates or can they not using this carbohydrates? I hope that this fermentation of carbohydrates is clear to you guys. All of the best. God bless you all. Bye-bye.